everybody, Dr. Diane, your libido doc here. Welcome back to another episode of The Lounge. Today we're talking about a really important topic, shame and libido. I want to talk about this today because I actually posted a YouTube video on this topic about a year ago, and I got a lot of comments. I got a lot of people reaching out to me on this topic, so I figured it would be a good one to dive in even further. I want to remind you all that before we get started, you can always go take my libido quiz at libidoquiz.com. That's where you can have a free quiz that will help you understand and diagnose the likely root causes of your libido imbalances. So the first part is a research-based quiz. The second part is something that I developed with a programmer after years and years of study. So really good practical information. You'll get to ideas on the root cause of your libido imbalances, as well as solutions and strategies and tips to follow that are specifically designed for your quiz answers. So moving on to today's topic, shame and libido. This is a really important topic because there's so much sexual and intimacy type of shame that happens in our society for so many different reasons. So I want to just, before we go deeper, take a moment to say shame and libido issues sometimes come from things like trauma, assault, abuse. So if any of that has happened and you don't feel like you have processed that, definitely consider turning this off, going and talking with a mental health therapist, and really getting support for that. There's many different reasons why we have shame with libido, shame with intimacy. This can go from anything from sexual trauma to body image issues to things that have been told to us through religion and society and parents and teachers and friends and colleagues and lovers over the years. So many women, for example, have shame around their own genitals, their own vulva and vagina, because they've been told it should look different, it should smell different. We have all of these things that are constantly being blasted to us as women around how it should look, douching for how it should smell, which I do not recommend. It really destroys those good bacteria that actually help the vagina stay healthy, prevent it against disease, and actually helps so much with that vaginal tone and well-being. So stay away from those chemical types of douches. They're definitely very, very, very dangerous. But the point is, we get this shame from so many different ways. Sometimes it can be a lover telling us something in bed that was harmful for us. Sometimes it's just a lover saying something in bed that they meant something that was kind, and we took it the wrong way when we got triggered. I know for me, I actually am a survivor of sexual assault. And for me, I had a lot of shame around my body and my anatomy and my vulva and vagina because for so long, I had this strange and this horrible association from that trauma. So there's so many different reasons we get shame in our body. Now, one of the things that came up when I had posted this information on YouTube, somebody had responded in a comment and said something along the lines of that shame actually had a purpose. And they were saying, hey, we shouldn't get rid of shame because shame has a purpose. So I want to take a moment and address that, because really when it comes down to feelings are in many ways flags of something going on. So if I say something mean to somebody, for example, and I feel ashamed of what I said afterwards, that is information that is telling me that, oh, it's not very nice to say something mean. It doesn't feel good. I don't want to hurt others. So from that standpoint, some of that shame feeling could be looked at in that scenario as information and feedback of a behavior that I did that I don't want to repeat. That's not the shame I'm talking about here, right? The shame I'm talking about here is shame because of something that happened in our lives that is making us feel unnecessarily bad and unnecessarily guilty and unnecessarily wrong about who we are as human beings and about our sexuality. And that's the biggest thing. And there's so many things from a subconscious level. Like I love working on the subconscious, and there's so many things on a subconscious level that can be related to shame, right? It can be related to what we were told as a child about self-pleasure, right? It could be because of what a friend said to us about the fact that maybe we were more promiscuous than them, right? It could be the fact that we were a virgin until we got married and we got made fun of for that, right? There could be so many different reasons for people making fun of us or people giving us a hard time about our choices, and that leading to a sense of shame even on a subconscious level. Because one of the things that can happen is when we have trauma, and the shame I'm talking about oftentimes creates these microtraumas. Microtraumas have been studied a decent amount in children and in looking at how some of these microtraumas actually play out long-term in depression and anxiety and mental health disorders. And it's very, very clear that these microtraumas that so many of us have, in fact, pretty much all of us have microtraumas, and they impact us, right? And they get into us on a subconscious level because these microtraumas, what will happen is, let's say we had some sort of reason why we got shamed around our sexuality. And if we got shamed around our sexuality, our nervous system actually holds that memory, right? And so if anything is said, even at later years, like how these microtraumas work, they're like PTSD on a way. So it's like if anything gets said to us later on, that on a subconscious level kind of brings that feeling of shame, kind of brings that feeling of guilt, kind of brings that feeling like we're doing something wrong, it can actually trigger those microtraumas that come up. And when it's coming, when it comes to intimacy, when it comes to deeply connecting with our partner in the bedroom, right? When it comes to these moments, when it comes to the ability to experience pleasure, when it comes to self-pleasure, when it comes to all these things regarding our sexuality, one of the things that can happen is these microtraumas wind up getting in our nervous system, our subconscious. And if somebody says something similar that from a subconscious level is reminding us, even in the tiniest way, of that event we felt shame around, we might actually cut off blood flow. We might cut off nervous system connection. This is where sometimes people dissociate during sex. So I talk a lot about on this podcast, when you listen to other episodes, about the ability of the woman's brain to multitask. So it's not unusual, right, for a woman's brain, because of all the ways the blood flows to the different, craters of the brain. It's not unusual for women to have moments where they're leaving the present moment with their lover and their mind goes someplace else, right? To the list or to the kids or those sorts of things. That's fairly normal from a standpoint of how the female brain is set up, and we have to practice bringing it to the moment. However, one thing that you should be aware of and one thing to watch out for is almost like a dissociation, where you're so unpresent from the moment every time you are engaged intimately. And sometimes if you're feeling like you're dissociating, your mind is constantly wandering. I'm not talking about these small wandering, but if it's like, wow, this is just really hard to focus on being here with my partner, that can be a huge sign of a subconscious microtrauma happening and perhaps shame, right? And so we always want to, again, I'm going to emphasize this again, because this is, I am not a clinical therapist. This is not also the place for clinical therapy, even if I was. This is education, right? So I want to always emphasize that, hey, if you're exploring these microtraumas, make sure you have a therapist, make sure you have somebody that you can really deeply work with. But one of the things that I've seen to really help to repair microtraumas in these, scenarios, especially when we are talking about microtraumas, we're not talking about major assaults and those sorts of things, right? Is to begin to do more exploratory work around how do we actually feel about sex? Like if I ask you right now, how do you feel about sex? How do you feel about, confidence with sex? How do you feel when you're touched? Does it feel good? How do you feel about pleasure? If I ask you, like, how do you feel? Do you feel like it's safe? Do you feel like it's bad? Do you feel like guilty around pleasure? Do you feel like it's against some sort of belief? And what we're doing with exercises like this, we're really working to say, hey, are there any sort of mental, emotional types of blocks that are actually limiting you from enjoying the depths of your sexuality, the depths of pleasure? I truly believe that pleasure is this gift that we have as humans, because human life is hard, right? Human life has stressors. Nobody gets out of that. Everybody has good days and bad days. And sometimes we have bad day after bad day after bad day. And it just feels like, gosh, we're just getting hit over the head. Pleasure is one of the things that I personally believe as humans that we are given as a gift to actually help us counteract and stay balanced through those hard times, right? And so the idea of being able to deeply connect more and more to our pleasure body is about staying balanced. It's about releasing chemicals that are actually helping us to stay healthy and happy and reduce stress while we go through the craziness of the ups and downs of life, because we never know every day. Every day is a mystery, right? And we get up and sometimes it's like, we think it's a good day and it's going to be a really hard day. And pleasure is one of the ways we stay balanced during those challenging times. And so what we're doing with some of these exercises and saying, like, how do you feel innately about pleasure? Do you feel guilty about the concept of pleasure? I know a lot of people that do. And there's so much charge around this stuff oftentimes. So what we're doing here is we're starting to unwind and starting to try to get get into the subconscious to say, how do you really deeply feel about the concept of pleasure, about the concept of sex, about the concept of, of really deeply connecting physically, intimately with your partner, with yourself? And so once we begin to untangle that, once you begin to, to see that, oftentimes then we can see a question to ask yourself is, do you actually feel like you have any shame around the concept of sex? Do you feel like you have any shame around the concept of intimacy? And have a journal and really write this out, because it's amazing sometimes what comes up. And then once you do that, the reason we're doing this is because we're trying to get down to those subconscious things that are connecting to emotions that are preventing you from deeply connecting to yourself, deeply connecting to your partner, and deeply experiencing the pleasure that we get to have as human beings. So in how to do this, once you begin to understand some of these ways that perhaps your mind and your subconscious are working, and like I said, definitely recommend doing this through, introspection, journal activities, set some time aside from this. Then the question to really ask is, okay, well, if my subconscious has this story from childhood that sex is something to be shamed about, or self-pleasure something to have shame about, do I really actually believe that as an adult? And do you really? And if you really do, it might be a good thing to go get therapeutic, some therapeutic work done. Or EMDR. There's a lot of different types of programs that help us process those things. But sometimes when we do these exercises, one of the huge things that I find is that we can actually see that for many people, we can change that shame, because as an adult, it's almost like we're running this program, these stories, this subconscious thing from a childhood or from, teenage years, from old stuff, old patterns. And actually, the thing that happens as an adult is we start to realize I don't actually even believe that anymore, but somehow I still have that story that's running in my subconscious. So we can ask ourselves, do we actually believe that sex is something to be shamed, feel shameful around? And if we don't, then it's what do we actually want to believe? What do we actually do believe about sex, about pleasure, about intimacy? And then what we want to do is we want to start to rewrite those old neural programs. And we do this through visualization. We do this through meditation. We also do this through the experience of pleasure. And even simple things like experiencing pleasure with a partner, with ourselves, and throughout that experience, or even throughout orgasm, that moment of orgasm. But if you don't get to orgasm, it doesn't matter. You can still do this just by experiencing pleasure. And almost looking into your partner's eyes or touching yourself lovingly and repeating something that is more like a healthy thing to say around wow, I am worthy of this pleasure. I deserve this pleasure. This pleasure keeps me balanced. I'm so grateful to whatever you believe in, God, spirit, universe, whatever you believe in. I'm so grateful for the ability to bring myself into balance by experiencing this pleasure. And if we say that while we're in the height of that pleasure experience, and combining those things oftentimes will help the nervous system reprogram, so that over time, then we don't have those childhood stories around shame. And instead, we have these new programs around, pleasure is this gift that is given to me that I deeply get to enjoy as a human being. And not only do I deeply get to enjoy, pleasure is this gift that I get to use to balance my stress, to raise my happy hormones, to help me sleep better, to enjoy life and community and my partner better, to be able to show up to my work from a more passionate place, right? That's what we get out of pleasure. So I hope this was helpful. I'm going to put in the show notes for you guys too. I have a very low price program called Hack Your Mind. Hack Your Mind, we go through and how to reprogram thoughts, beliefs, emotions. I have a 30-day challenge in there with it. So it's a very small activity you do for 5 minutes a day for 30 days. And I've seen some really good results with this over a decade and a half of work around helping people reprogram some of those subconscious beliefs. So it's a step-by-step guide plus this 30-day challenge that does not take you much time to really get you on a program to help you repattern this. So I'm going to put that in the show notes as well for you guys so you have that. All right, everybody. It's been a pleasure talking to you about this very important information. This is Dr. Diane, your libido doc, reminding you to always stay classy, always stay sexy, and always remember to be a little badassy. We'll see you in the next one.